Hey Jason, thanks for hopping on GraphQL World. Really excited to have you. Jason is the creator of WordPress GraphQL. And for those who don't know, GraphQL is an applications layer query language that was open sourced by Facebook in 2015 to help you build apps in a more high fidelity way, overlaying a type system on your API layer. So what Jason is here today, he is the creator of WordPress GraphQL, and it's a really cool way to basically create or generate GraphQL schemas on top of your WordPress backend. So hey Jason, how's it going?
Pretty good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what was kind of the whole inspiration for WP GraphQL?
Sure. So some of my background, I work for Digital First Media. We're behind a lot of large publishing sites, DenverPost.com, TwinCities.com. We have, 40 or something newspaper properties across the country. And over the past couple of years, we've been migrating from old systems to WordPress. And so WordPress actually powers a lot more than just the websites. WordPress for us actually is the entry point for all the media. We distribute media from WordPress to print systems. We distribute it from WordPress to our native mobile applications. So WordPress is kind of like a central place where a lot of data gets accessed from, sent to and from. So we've been using a lot of REST interfaces for getting data in and out of WordPress. But the more we do that, the more struggles we have getting just the data we need, or efficiently getting related data. So some of those struggles kind of led us to just exploring other options on how we can do that better. I historically used to mess around with Meteor. I never built anything production with Meteor.
Gotcha.
But through following Meteor, and then I heard about Apollo, got interested in GraphQL, and then the need actually popped up here. We're struggling with some stuff in REST. I knew about GraphQL, so I said, let's explore this a little bit. It's actually presenting a good opportunity to solve a lot of the issues that we've been experiencing with REST. So I started just proof of concepting what it could look like bringing GraphQL to WordPress, and started kind of selling it to my coworkers, like, hey, this actually is solving, some of the stuff. Like we have a whole mobile team, right? And they constantly struggle with our REST API. So some of it was addressing their needs first, and then we've got all sorts of ideas since then on what to do. So we discussed it initially to solve some problems in-house, and then we said, you know what, this is going to be really useful for WordPress in general. So instead of making it just proprietary thing, we said let's figure out how to make this an open source thing that anybody running WordPress can now have a core GraphQL API out of the box, and an easy way to extend their schema or even modify. Like if they don't like some of the naming conventions I've chosen out of the box, they can easily filter it out for their specific system.
Gotcha.
But out of the box, like in WordPress, WordPress by default has posts and pages and whatnot, so the plugin will give you the core data out of the box.
Gotcha. That's really cool. So basically, you had a bunch of different apps and mobile apps, websites that you're running off of this same core set of data, and then you wanted to expose that through GraphQL because it's the shortcomings of REST, especially when you have different form factors trying to query in different ways for all sorts of different pages. So I mean, have you just been using WordPress the whole time? And then what kind of REST, how are you exposing it through REST?
So we've been using WordPress for the past 2 years here at Digital First Media. And WordPress has a REST API. A couple years ago, it was just a plugin you could install, and it would add REST endpoints. Similar to this plugin, adds GraphQL endpoint. But about a year and a half ago, that plugin actually got merged into WordPress core. So WordPress, when you download WordPress right now, WordPress out of the box has REST endpoints for basic content for posts and pages and
Okay.
whatnot.
Oh, cool.
So we were using that. We also extended that a lot for our needs.
Yep.
Like we have, like I said, a network of news sites, and then we have a central site that they all talk to, and we store in the central site like subscriptions. So when content changes on site A, it notifies the central installation that, hey, content changed over here, and it knows that site B is subscribed to that content, so it pushes it up there,
Cool.
and then that sends it out to the sites that are subscribed to the content. Because we do a lot of content sharing across the network.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
You know,
so
like,
then did you created that whole pub subsystem on top of WordPress?
Yeah. So yeah, not me myself, but I was part of it. Yeah, we have a pretty big team here. So yeah, so we created that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then now, like with GraphQL, you kind of overlay the same like REST concepts that used to happen with WordPress, or I guess they come natively with WordPress, but like generated through a GraphQL schema. So you take like all the different models, like the data models from WordPress, and then you generate queries and mutations in a GraphQL schema. Is there any way to like extend that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the GraphQL plugin we have is completely separate from the REST API, so it's not like a wrapper around the REST API, the WordPress REST API.
It's directly
They're separate
on top of the layer, the data.
Yeah, so it doesn't wrap the REST API at all. But yeah, in the plugin, there are hooks and filters which are pretty common in WordPress plugins. So you can, from your own code base, you can filter in and either add to the schema definition that WP GraphQL gives you, maybe alter names, remove fields altogether, register new types. We have a pretty flexible type system that is just a thin layer over GraphQL PHP already. So and it is using the GraphQL PHP library from, I think it's Webonics.
Okay.
They open source just GraphQL PHP, so I take that and port that to WordPress. So
got it. Cool. And then like, how do you handle things like authentication, security, things like that?
Sure. So I've got a second plugin. So right now, we didn't want to bundle like authentication mechanism like straight into the core GraphQL plugin, because there's different ways to authenticate that people might want to use, like OAuth or whatever, or basic auth or whatever they want. So the core, if you use the core WP GraphQL plugin, there's no authentication mechanism mandated there, so it's flexible. I have a authentication plugin that will also be open source under the WP GraphQL repository, probably within the next month or so.
Cool.
That's going to be JWT token-based authentication. So, and the plan for that, so there will be one mutation for username and login. You'll get a token back. You'll get the plan right now is you'll get 2 tokens back. You'll get a short-lived token that has role and user actual info that expires with a relative short time frame, and then you'll get a longer-lived refresh token that you can store to use to get an
refresh that
back.
Yeah.
So that's the plan, and then the longer-lived token will be persisted in the WordPress database, and that's something we can revoke. You'll have an interface to revoke it.
Yeah. So
if the user, whatever, it's maybe an employee that got fired or whatever, you can revoke it or whatever the case might be.
Gotcha. And then how does WordPress currently do? I'm just not familiar with how WordPress works with authentication. Like, how does WordPress handle its authentication currently, and how is that different from what you're doing, and how do they connect?
Yeah, so WordPress use it by default. If you log into just the WordPress dashboard, it uses cookie-based authentication.
Yeah.
Since you're on the same domain and whatnot. Here you have the possibility to potentially build stuff that remains on the same domain as your WordPress install. And you could, in that case, use cookie-based authentication still. But obviously, you have the ability to build something completely decoupled. So in that case, that's where the tokens come in. You'll send that in the header. You'll send the token in the header before any request actually gets executed with GraphQL. It'll check if it's a valid token. and then set the current user based on whether it's valid or not. And then it'll add the user object to the context in the GraphQL, schema resolver.
Yep.
And then that context will be available in all the resolvers.
Yep. And then they'll go through WordPress to be able to authenticate there.
Yeah, and then each resolver can say, hey, does this user have permission to create, read, edit, whatever this content?
Awesome.
Before it proceeds, yeah.
Awesome. So like, how many like sites are currently being built with WordPress GraphQL? Like, how many people are there? Like, you open source this thing, right? And like, are there other people using it outside of Digital First Media?
It's still in pretty early beta. So since we work with enterprise level, we host with WordPress VIP, which is enterprise hosting ran by Automatic. So any piece of code we put out onto our servers goes through a pretty strict code review with them. So it's been evolving pretty slow. It's not quite in production yet on our end, so I haven't actually done a lot of publicity for it yet.
Yeah.
The GraphQL repo, the WP GraphQL repo has, I don't know, like 20 stars or something. It's pretty low still. But I actually, so we submitted it for review to VIP a couple weeks ago, so it's actually sitting in review. They did an initial review. They check a lot of stuff like security issues because it's on their servers, right?
Yeah.
So they check security issues, all sorts of real high level stuff, right? Because they're the folks behind WordPress.com, which is
exactly. So they need to go like review every little bit of it to make sure.
Yeah.
Like when they go push it out and when they release it, so many people are going to use it, and they need to make sure it's
potentially
work.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's not necessarily going to be on all WordPress.com sites, but it's the same team behind WordPress.com. So they have pretty strict review process. So it's kind of going slow just because of the nature of how we work with things.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I don't think there's a ton of people using it right now.
Yep.
And WordPress community in general is pretty caught up in REST because it just got merged into WordPress core about a year ago. So everybody is really into REST still.
Yeah. Okay.
GraphQL is not super popular in the WordPress community yet.
Yeah.
But
it could be packaged in with like the core WordPress package for each app as well. Yeah. That could be really interesting. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah. So do you want to like show us kind of like what you've been working on, how it works?
Yeah. So here's this is the WP GraphQL GitHub repository. So the main plugin is just wp/GraphQL/WP/GraphQL or -GraphQL.
Yep.
So to install it, you would just clone this plugin, add the plugin to your WordPress installs plugin directory, and then like any other WordPress plugin, you would go to your plugins page.
Okay.
So whatever /WP admin, and then navigate to your plugins page.
Yep.
And the plugin will be in your plugins list. And just like any plugin, you just click activate. There's not going to be any visual changes. You just click activate. And one thing to note, and this is documented. This is all documented in the README as well of the repository. But once you activate it, there's one thing you have to do in WordPress. It's called flushing your permalinks. So that's under just settings, permalinks. Because the one thing that GraphQL does, so you just navigate to the permalinks page, save changes, and then you'll have a /GraphQL endpoint now.
Yep.
And if you just visit it in the browser,
it'll go to GraphQL.
It doesn't yet. That's coming soon.
Okay.
It'll just be nothing right now.
Nothing.
But but in a tool like GraphQL, you can now enter the URL for the endpoint. So in my case, right here, and then you can browse the schema for that endpoint. Let's see. Come on. And this is I'm using an app called GraphQL. It's a desktop app. There's Chrome extensions that do the same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of folks like GraphQL and Scaffold, right, have
Yep.
built-in explorers as well.
Yep. Yep.
So in this case, you just point it to an endpoint. At the moment, the schema that we have support for is just the core WordPress data, content, and at the moment, at the exact moment, it's only the read layer, so you can query data from WordPress.
Uh-huh.
We have mutation coming soon, but we're kind of waiting for the initial review from VIP so that we get feedback on any changes that we might need to make before we finalize mutations. But they're coming very soon.
Okay.
So at the moment, if you install it, you're just going to have the read, which is probably okay for most people that are doing decoupled stuff with WordPress at the moment. But yeah, the mutation layer is coming very soon. So if we look at a schema, it has support for a lot of the just core WordPress data. So we have like posts and pages, which is the core content types that you have in WordPress, and then media items. In WordPress, it's called attachments, which is just an old naming convention. Which so I updated that to something more that refers to what it actually is better, because it's videos, images, things like that. And then we have the taxonomies, which is how you relate data in WordPress. So we have categories, tags, and then other data that WordPress knows about, like theme data, right? Like what data, what theme is currently active, or themes that could be active, user data, the current viewer, and then the schema is set up to be relay compliant, so it does have a node type, so you can do node queries. So I'll do just some example queries,
Sure.
To show just some basic usage. So yeah, you can just run a query. So one of the most common thing you'll see in WordPress is probably a list of posts, right?
Yep.
So after all, WordPress was created to be a blog, so it is relay compliant. So you see the shape is looks like a relay. So you have your posts, and then each post has edges, and each edge has a node.
Yep.
And then inside the node, obviously you can just start typing, and it's going to tell you what fields there are, or you can come over and look at what data is available. So if we're looking at posts, these are the fields that are available to us. So we have related data like the author. Each post has an author, and then on that author, since it's an object, we can get data from that author.
Yep.
We can get things like the link, which is the URL. We can get the title and the date, maybe the content. So that would be potentially enough to build out just a simple blog page, right? You can get now a list of posts with the author info, the link to the post, the title, the date, and the content, and then we can run that. It's gonna query for the posts. By default, if I don't pass any information, it's gonna be the 10 most recent posts.
Yep.
If I do want obviously more than 10, I can say something like first, like I don't know, 20. So if we look at this right now, it's going to be just 10 with the content.
Yep.
I'm going to remove this content just because it's so long to look at. But yeah, so we can see we're going to have the list of 10 there. Now it's going to be 20 since I updated 20. And then we can get paginated data as well. So I can get a cursor on the edges. I can get page info for the query. So I could do something like has next page, start cursor, end cursor. So we can run this query. It should give me has next page is true. I think in the current install I have 38 posts created. So if I'm asking for 20, has next page is going to come back true. So then whatever client I'm using can know, hey, I might want to keep going forward. So we could do add the last cursor, run it again. now I'm going to get the 21 through 38.
Yep.
There is no more pages after that, so I'm going to get has next page is false, and I'll have the start and end cursor still as reference, and then I'll have just the 18 remaining items in here.
Awesome.
So that's just how that works, and then related stuff like taxonomies and terms. Each post can be tagged or categorized, so I can get related data like post tags.
Yep.
And I can have that listed out. So same thing, I can get something like the tag ID, maybe the tag name, the tag. I don't know what I would want. I don't know, something like that. So each node in WP GraphQL is going to have a global ID, like a relay ID, which is opaque, and then we can use that to query. And then it's going to have a unique type ID, which is actually the ID that WordPress knows it as. So if we look here, I output the ID and the post tag ID here. So for a tag, you get this global ID that relay can use to fetch a node. And then you have post tag ID, which is the ID in the WordPress database. So you have two things. So same with posts. On the post, you have like a global ID as well, and then you'll have a post ID. So for whatever reason, if you actually need the WordPress ID from the database, you can access that through GraphQL still.
Gotcha.
And then the global ID is just a hash of the type of content it is, and then the system ID.
Got it. So you use like the relay, like to global ID and the from global ID functions to be able to like unmask and mask them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then cursors are the cursors. So WordPress, like the WordPress query mechanisms, don't have like a official like cursor based pagination. So the way I'm handling pagination, the cursor is an offset of where the data is in relation to the current query. So it's not like some databases will actually generate an actual cursor for you for the entire like row or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can reference that again. WordPress isn't set up to do anything like that. So
how does WordPress's pagination work? It's like
it's got a post per page, and then the page. It's a page number one, so you can ask for like I want to show 10 posts per page, and page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. So it's and then you can do just a straight up offset as well too.
Limit offset.
So this is actually using offset. So the cursor will just be an offset of the query based on the arguments of that particular query. So like in our case, when you run it with no arguments, it's going to be 0 through 20. The cursors will be 0 through 20.
Yeah.
And then if you do the next page, it'll be 21 through 38 in my case. And then when it talks back to WordPress, it'll use that to offset. And then I do have some basic support for some additional arguments. I'm using where, and then you can set various things like if you want to query for post where the author is ID 2 or something like that, or where post tag is the Denver Broncos or something like that. So there are additional arguments that you can pass. It's like I could do ID where ID is, that, and I should just get back that one post. That apparently isn't working. So, or actually, that might be the global ID. Anyway, so there are some additional where arguments where you can kind of minimize the results you get back based on certain parameters. Go ahead. Sorry.
Do you have some sort of like site that uses these queries kind of like in production or like prototyping right now in development?
Yep. So We do. I do. This is still kind of in a selling phase to people I work with right now, so it is just proof of concept at the moment.
Yep.
But I do have just a little bit of a React interface. Let's see. So this is as soon as this loads. So yeah, I'm just prototyping an interface. It's just a React. There's not really a server with it. It's just React, and then using Apollo client. And for components, I'm using a library called Ant Design.
Yep.
Which is I think pretty sweet.
Yep.
But yeah, so let me kick that. Let me start that. Come on. Let me kick this. Hold on. Sorry, I'm on my other screen. I'm restarting that. Hold on.
No, you're good. I can just like edit this part out. So
okay.
Less downtime.
I don't know why it's crawling on me. One more time. Okay. It's like Skype is like killing my memory or something. I'm gonna close a couple. I'm in Slack and Skype right now. I think the combination is like.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
All right. Okay. So. Okay. Yeah. So this is just a proof of concept interface.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm using React, Apollo client, and then for the styles and whatnot, I'm using a library called Ant Design for the component. So it's really nothing crazy at the moment. All I do is get a list of articles and put it into a list. I do have Apollo DevTools, so we can open up DevTools. Sometimes Apollo DevTools takes a second to show up. Okay, here it is. So we can look. So it only has one query right now. I have two routes just to show proof of concept of routing and how queries get tracked in Apollo client, things like that. So this page has no queries on it. It's proof of concept of like, hey, we could have a settings page and then we could have, content on another route. So we can come to the articles route. It's going to use Apollo to run a query. And why is Apollo not showing me? Apollo usually shows the queries in here. Let's see.
Just reloading.
Okay, it does. Here, let me say. I'll start that over. You can edit that out since that was all buggy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll send that over. Okay. So yeah, this is a proof of concept UI, just showing how to pull data from WordPress in a completely decoupled environment. So this is just a React app using Apollo client, and for the components, using a library called Ant Design. And so there's not really any server. I have a dev server just for hot module reloading, but there's not actually like an actual server that's doing any logic here. It's just all front end at the moment. So yeah, this it's using Apollo, like I was saying, to manage the queries and fetch data from WordPress.
Yeah.
I've got Apollo DevTools installed here so we can see what's happening in the app.
Yep.
So right now it's like I said, very simple. It's got two routes, one that actually gets data from WordPress and one that really does nothing right now,
Yep.
but just a proof of concept thing. So if we come here to the articles route, we'll see what queries are run. Right now there's just the one query to get a list of articles, so we can see what's happening here. So I'm just asking for 5 posts with some basic data, and then I'm outputting that data into a card component inside the list. And then same thing with the Apollo DevTools. We can run it in GraphQL straight from the DevTools. But what's really cool, I can log into this the WordPress instance, edit content in WordPress. I'm gonna try to do this side by side. So I can log in. This demo app is not connected to WordPress directly, like as far as like the stack goes. It's completely decoupled. It's just JavaScript. It's not something you install to WordPress. They're completely separate systems.
Yep.
But I can still log into WordPress. I can go to my post. So in this case, it's just getting a list. It's rendering a list of 5 posts. So I can go to this test post update, click edit in WordPress, edit my content here. So just for demo's sake, I'll update the title. So we'll just remove like the word update. From there, I'll click update in WordPress. And then just to show how cool the tools around the GraphQL community are, Apollo actually will monitor the data for you, right? And so since that updated in WordPress, now you see it updated in this decoupled client, right?
Nice. So is that using poll intervals?
It is currently, yes, using poll intervaling intervals, polling intervals in Apollo. There will be, I think, in the future some sort of support in WP GraphQL to set up subscriptions.
Yep.
But obviously WordPress being PHP, sending out the subscriptions in a real time, that's still going to be on you to figure out what you want to use for that. It'll probably, I mean, if depending on who you are, you might have the resources to set up and host your own socket server, or you might need a third-party tool to handle those connections for you. I know for us, we're experimenting with using the AWS. I can't remember what it's called, but they have AWS has a socket layer, so we're kind of experimenting with doing subscriptions to that internally. But that would be not open source as part of the GraphQL project, at least not yet.
Right.
So yeah, this just using intervals for now, but it's pretty cool. You can now interact with WordPress content from WordPress or from not WordPress. And then the tooling.
So you basically still get like the benefits of the CMS with like almost like hot reloading almost. And also like the benefits of GraphQL and decoupled front and back end environment for like development.
Yeah,
that's
and
cool.
the big thing here too is I think WordPress as a dashboard or CMS, I think sometimes tries to solve maybe too many problems that it sometimes hurts itself, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, having the data be a decoupled layer that you can access however you want, I think will allow people to build like really focused applications that solve a particular set of users' needs very well, instead of trying to build WordPress to solve everybody's needs.
Right.
So I think WordPress as a whole, I mean, you have bakers with their websites on there and news sites and auto dealers. It's like they're trying to be this one size fits all, and it's worked well, but I think it has the potential to work better.
Yeah.
If the data and the interface is two separate things. And and WordPress is very powerful. It's got a lot of great stuff behind the scenes, so it still makes a lot of sense. And you might, like in our case, we actually have websites running on it, but we have other needs for that data. So so now we can do like these micro interface apps Like one real case for us is curation of content for our native mobile apps, right? So we'll pull in data from WordPress into a decoupled interface where a certain set of people can curate that data and then send it up to our native app.
Yep.
So instead of building that inside of WordPress itself, because those people don't need all of WordPress, they just need this small tool, so we can build just this dedicated fast UI because it's only loading the data that it needs, not all of WordPress. Yeah.
Cool. So for everyone that's watching, we can put the links down below in the description section here. That'll link you to the open source GitHub repo for WordPress GraphQL, along with a demo site that you guys have. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for hopping on the call. It's really good to have you. Yeah, I think that this is a really, really interesting use case of GraphQL. A lot of people are rolling their own different languages, but this one itself is built on top of another platform, which allows you to get the whole CMS side of things. So it's almost like this kind of like Django backend. Have you ever used Django before? Where
I personally haven't, but we do. We actually have another team here that is using GraphQL with Django. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because then you get the whole CMS side of things as well.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
And we actually have a separate tool in-house too that is a GraphQL server on a servlet. It's a Lambda GraphQL, and you can talk to WordPress or our Django application through one endpoint. So you write a GraphQL query to this one endpoint, and then you could potentially get data from WordPress or this other Django application in one spot.
That's really neat. So the whole data consolidation problem, in one query, you can go fetch from multiple places at once.
Yeah.
Neat.
And that's not that big yet. There's very little you can do with it right now. Yeah. It's very similar. It's a proof of concept I had just to pitch to some people hey, look.
This is what it's really good for.
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thanks again for hopping on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was GraphQL World, and we'll see you next time.
All right, see ya.
See ya.